Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. I don't usually go into my grandson's room without asking, but that afternoon something just felt different. The house was quiet, unusually so. The kind of quiet that makes you hear the clock ticking louder than usual and your own thoughts even louder than that. I had been dusting the shelves in the hallway when I noticed his door half open. A small strip of sunlight stretched across the floor, stopping right at my feet. I don't know why, but I hesitated before pushing it open all the way. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was worry. He'd been distant lately, coming home from school, heading straight to his room, and barely saying a word during dinner. At 16, I knew he needed space, but as his grandmother, I couldn't help wanting to know what was going on behind that closed door. The air in his room smelled faintly of cedar and that cologne I'd bought him last Christmas, the one he swore he didn't like. The blinds were halfway shut, letting in just enough light to catch the edges of the posters on the walls, old rock bands, a few photographs of his friends, and one picture of his late grandfather and him fishing by the lake. That photo always made me pause. I started by straightening the bed, thinking it wouldn't hurt to help him a little. Teenagers rarely notice such things, but I've always believed that a tidy space clears the mind. As I tucked the corner of the blanket, something slipped out from underneath, a small, worn-out notebook. It wasn't like the school notebooks I'd seen before. The cover was dark blue, the edges frayed as if it had been carried around for a long time. I picked it up carefully, feeling the texture of the paper against my fingertips. My first instinct was to put it back, but something made me hold onto it a moment longer. Maybe it was the faint writing on the cover, for later. For later. I sat down on the edge of his bed, feeling that mix of guilt and curiosity that only grandmothers know too well. I opened it slowly, half expecting to see sketches or homework notes. But instead, the first page had just one line, written in his neat but slightly uneven handwriting. I miss him every day, but I don't know how to say it. My throat tightened. I turned another page. There were poems, small ones, full of half-finished thoughts. Some about the lake, others about growing up, and a few that simply said things like, "Why does silence feel heavier now?" or "Grandma tries to smile, but I can tell she misses him too." I sat there, holding that notebook like it was made of glass. Every word pulled me deeper into his quiet world, his grief, his confusion, his longing to understand life after loss. I hadn't realized he'd been carrying all that weight inside him. I thought I was the only one still haunted by the empty chair at the dinner table. The sound of the front door closing startled me. He was home earlier than usual. For a moment, I panicked. Should I hide the notebook? Pretend I hadn't seen it? But something inside me told me not to. Not this time. When he walked into the room, his expression froze the second he saw the notebook in my hands. "Grandma," he said, his voice caught between anger and fear, "why are you in my room?" I took a slow breath, steadying my voice. "I was just cleaning, sweetheart. I didn't mean to pry, but I found this." He shifted his backpack off his shoulder, his jaw tightening. "You weren't supposed to read that." "I know," I said softly. "And I'm sorry. But I read just a little. I didn't know you were feeling this way." He didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the floor. The silence stretched, and I could see the struggle in his eyes, the same one I'd felt many times when I wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. "I miss him too, you know," I said quietly. "Every single day." His head lifted slightly, and for a moment, he looked so much like his grandfather that it almost broke me. His lips trembled before he finally whispered, "I didn't think anyone noticed." I reached out, placing the notebook gently on the bed between us. "Of course I noticed. You just didn't know that I was trying to be strong for you. I thought I had to hold everything together." He sat down beside me, his shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to hide it. I just didn't know how to talk about it." Neither of us said anything for a while. The late afternoon light was turning golden, pouring into the room like a quiet warmth wrapping around us. The house no longer felt so silent. "I used to write things like that too," I told him. "When your grandfather and I first met, I'd keep journals, pages full of what I couldn't say out loud. Maybe that's something we share." He looked at me then, his eyes softening. Really? Yes, I said with a small smile. Maybe I'll show you one someday. If you promise to keep writing. He nodded slowly, and I could feel something shift, like a bridge quietly being rebuilt between two lonely islands. Later that evening, when he came downstairs for dinner, he was different. He still didn't talk much, but when he sat across from me, he looked up and smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough. That night, I placed his notebook back under the blanket, exactly where I'd found it. But I slipped a note inside, just one line: "You're not alone in this." As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I realized something simple but powerful. Sometimes love isn't about knowing the right words. It's about quietly finding them together, and maybe, just maybe, that's how healing begins. After that evening, the house felt different. There was a quiet understanding between my grandson and me that hadn't been there before. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it existed in the small things: the way he lingered a moment longer at the kitchen counter, the way he left his shoes by the door without me asking, the subtle glance when our eyes met across the living room. It was as though sharing the notebook had opened a door, one neither of us had expected to find. I noticed him more closely now, really seeing him in a way I hadn't for months. There was a fragility behind his confident teenage exterior, a mixture of curiosity, fear, and longing for connection. One afternoon, I found him sitting on the porch, his knees pulled up, sketching in a blank notebook. The pages were full of drawings, trees, buildings, faces, and even some of the lake where he and his grandfather used to fish. "Those are beautiful," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, a little embarrassed. "Thanks," he muttered, closing the notebook halfway. "Can I see more?" I asked gently. He hesitated, then handed it to me. As I flipped through the pages, I felt a warmth in my chest. He had captured so much of what he couldn't put into words: memories, emotions, and even his quiet moments of solitude. Each sketch seemed to tell a story, a conversation with his grandfather that he hadn't yet shared aloud. "That's very brave," I said, tracing a pencil line on one of the drawings as if I could feel the energy behind it. "To show your feelings this way, it's not easy." He shrugged, but his eyes softened. I don't know. I guess I needed to do it." I nodded. "I understand. Sometimes expressing ourselves is easier through paper than through words. Your grandfather used to feel the same way." He looked at me then, with a mixture of curiosity and longing. "Did you keep his things too?" I smiled faintly. "I did. His fishing hat, his notebooks, a few letters he wrote but never sent. I kept them because they reminded me of the lessons he gave me, and of course, of him." He seemed to absorb that, holding the notebook a little tighter. It was one of those rare moments when silence isn't uncomfortable, it's comforting. And as we sat there on the porch, the wind softly rustling the leaves, I realized just how much we needed this shared quiet, this understanding that grief can be passed down, but also healed together. Over the next few days, our routines subtly shifted. He would sometimes invite me into his room, showing me sketches or notes, asking for advice, or simply sharing what he was thinking. We'd talk about school, friends, and memories of his grandfather. Each conversation, no matter how small, felt like a thread weaving us closer together. One evening, he asked me to sit with him while he worked on a larger drawing, a portrait of the lake with him and his grandfather in the boat, a scene I remembered vividly from my own memories. I watched as his hands moved carefully, the pencil capturing details, the ripples in the water, the reflection of the sky. He glanced at me occasionally, as if seeking approval, and when I nodded or smiled, a spark of confidence would brighten his face. "You know," I said quietly, "he would have been proud of you. Not just for the art, but for keeping his memory alive." His eyes moistened slightly, and I reached over, placing my hand over his. "It's okay to miss him, you know. It's okay to feel everything. That's how we remember, and that's how we grow." He exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and vulnerability. "I thought I had to hide it all. I didn't want anyone to see me like that." "You don't have to hide from me," I said. "I'll always see you. Even when it's hard, even when it hurts. You can trust me." The days that followed were gentle, marked by small discoveries and shared moments. One morning, I found a tiny handwritten note tucked into the notebook. It simply said, "Thank you, Grandma." I felt my chest tighten. It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of months of hidden emotions. We began walking together along the nearby trails, talking about nature, life, and memories. He started opening up more, laughing more, and even teasing me in the way teenagers do. But beneath the teasing, I could sense the quiet gratitude, the sense that he finally felt heard. One particular afternoon stands out. We were sitting on a bench by the river, watching the sunlight dance on the water. He handed me a page from his notebook. It was a drawing of us sitting there, our hands almost touching. The details were astonishing, from the ripples in the river to the wind catching my hair just right. "I wanted you to see it," he said, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "I never drew anyone before, like this." I took the page gently, feeling a lump in my throat. "It's beautiful. And it means a lot to me." We sat in silence for a while, letting the river's gentle flow fill the space between us. I realized then that our bond had deepened in ways I hadn't imagined. The notebook had been the doorway, but the trust, the shared grief, and the quiet moments were what built the bridge. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm orange glow across the river, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had given me a second chance to connect, to understand, and to help him navigate the complicated world of emotions that come with growing up and loss. And in that moment, I silently promised myself that I would continue to walk beside him, quietly guiding, listening, and loving, not as a perfect grandmother, but as someone who had learned, through experience, that sometimes the most powerful connections come from simply being present. The notebook remained tucked safely under his blanket, a silent witness to our evolving relationship. And I knew that in the coming weeks and months, it would continue to reveal hidden parts of him, little treasures of his heart waiting for the right time to be shared. Our journey was only beginning, and I felt ready to embrace it, step by step, word by word, sketch by sketch. It was a rainy afternoon when I first noticed the shift. The house had that damp, earthy smell that comes when the rain soaks the garden and creeps into every corner. I was in the kitchen, making tea, when I heard his footsteps on the stairs, hesitant, slow, as if he was weighing whether to come out or retreat back to his room. I had learned to recognize that hesitation. It usually meant he was carrying something heavy inside, something he wasn't ready to say out loud. He came into the kitchen quietly, the sleeve of his hoodie soaked from the rain. "Hey, Grandma," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Hey, sweetheart," I replied, offering a warm smile. "Tea?" He nodded but didn't move to sit. Instead, he leaned against the counter, staring at the floor. I watched him, sensing that something was bothering him more than usual. Finally, I set the tea aside and walked over, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked softly. His shoulders stiffened. "It's nothing," he mumbled. I didn't push, just let the silence stretch for a moment, letting him know I was there. He took a deep breath, the kind that almost cracks under the weight of hidden emotions, and finally looked up at me. His eyes were glistening, not from rain, but from the quiet storm inside him. I don't know how to handle school right now," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everyone seems so ahead. They know what they want. I feel stuck." I nodded slowly, understanding more than he realized. At 16, the pressure to have a plan, to excel, to fit into a world that often felt impatient and unforgiving, could feel overwhelming. "I know it seems like everyone has it figured out," I said, "but believe me, most of us are just figuring it out as we go. Your grandfather struggled with it too, in his own way. We all do." He swallowed, as if the words were heavy but somehow comforting. I feel like I'm letting everyone down. Including you." I felt a lump in my throat. "Oh, sweetheart, you could never let me down. I'm proud of you, no matter what. School, grades, mistakes, everything. It doesn't change how much I care about you. What matters is that you're honest with yourself and with me." He exhaled, a small sigh of relief that seemed to release a bit of the tension he had been carrying. Then, hesitantly, he asked, "Can I show you something?" I nodded, and he retreated to his room, returning with the notebook in hand. He placed it carefully on the counter between us, as if offering me a piece of his soul again. "I've been writing more," he said, a hint of nervousness in his tone. "Some of it. I don't know, it's about what I feel, about being lost, about missing him." I opened the notebook gently, turning to a page filled with flowing words, almost like a letter to someone he missed deeply. He watched me, holding his breath, and I realized how vulnerable he was in that moment, trusting me to witness the raw, unfiltered emotions he often buried deep inside. "These are very brave words," I told him softly. "You're facing your feelings instead of hiding from them. That's not easy." He shifted uncomfortably, but I could see a flicker of pride in his eyes. I don't want to be a burden," he admitted. "Sometimes I feel like nobody really gets it." "You're never a burden," I said firmly. "Sharing your thoughts doesn't make you a burden. It makes you human. And it helps me understand you better. That's what family is for, seeing each other, even in the messy parts." The rain continued tapping against the window, a rhythmic, soothing backdrop to our conversation. I could feel the weight of unspoken words lifting slightly from him, replaced by a fragile sense of trust. Over the next hour, we sat together, reading through his latest writings, talking quietly about everything from small frustrations at school to memories of his grandfather. We laughed at the silly drawings he tucked in between pages of words, and sometimes paused in silence, letting the emotions settle without needing to label them. By the time the rain slowed, a sense of calm had entered the room. He seemed lighter, not completely free of worry, but more willing to face it. I realized then that these shared moments, the gentle conversations, the notebook, the quiet understanding, were slowly building resilience in him, helping him navigate feelings that many adults never fully express. That evening, I found myself reflecting on the delicate balance of being a grandmother. It wasn't just about guidance or protection, it was about patience, listening, and showing up even when the words weren't perfect. He was learning to trust me, and in doing so, he was learning to trust himself. As I tucked the notebook back under his pillow, I felt a quiet pride and a profound sense of connection. The bond we were building wasn't flashy or dramatic, it was slow, steady, and deeply meaningful. And in that rain-soaked afternoon, I realized that sometimes the most transformative moments are the ones spent quietly, side by side, navigating the complicated emotions of growing up and moving forward. I left his room with a sense of peace, knowing that while the road ahead might have its challenges, we would face them together, one conversation, one sketch, and one heartfelt word at a time. The following weeks unfolded gently, almost like a slow sunrise spreading light over a landscape we had once thought shadowed. Each day brought subtle discoveries, glances, words, and moments that deepened the connection between my grandson and me. The notebook had become more than just paper and pencil. It was a bridge, a safe place where he could express himself without fear of judgment, and where I could quietly witness his growth and resilience. One Saturday morning, I found him in the living room, sprawled across the couch with the notebook open, sketches and notes scattered around him like leaves in the wind. The sunlight poured in through the tall windows, illuminating the room with a warm glow, catching the soft lines of his focused face. I hesitated at the doorway, not wanting to interrupt him, but he looked up and gave me the smallest smile. "Morning, Grandma," he said, his voice carrying that mixture of calm and pride I had come to recognize. "Morning, sweetheart," I replied, walking over. "What are you working on today?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Just some drawings, some thoughts too." I sat beside him, careful not to crowd his space. We shared the quiet of the morning, watching as his pencil moved across the pages, tracing memories, dreams, and emotions that had been tucked away for months. It struck me how much he had grown, not just in skill, but in confidence, in willingness to share pieces of himself that had once been hidden. After a while, he looked up at me and said, "Grandma, can I show you something I've been thinking about?" I nodded, encouraging him with a soft smile. He flipped to a page at the back of the notebook, a sketch of our house from the outside, with the garden, the porch, and the windows framed in delicate pencil strokes. But it wasn't just a drawing. Around the edges, he had written little notes, memories of afternoons spent reading, evenings of laughter, times of quiet conversation, and the moments when we had simply been together without saying much at all. "I wanted to capture it," he said softly, "so that someday, I won't forget these days." My heart ached with emotion. I reached over and took his hand gently. "You're already keeping the most important part," I said. "The memories, the feelings, the connection that lives in both of us. And someday, when you look back, you'll remember how much love was always here." He nodded, eyes glistening. I don't want to forget, Grandma." "You won't," I said, squeezing his hand. "Not ever. And you're helping me remember too. Life moves so fast, But these moments, they stay with us, quietly shaping who we are. The rain from the previous weeks had stopped, leaving the garden glistening and fragrant. We decided to step outside, bringing the notebook with us, and walked slowly through the familiar paths, talking about everything and nothing. We paused by the old oak tree, the one under which his grandfather had once taught him to fish. My grandson leaned against it thoughtfully, notebook open, and began sketching the tree as I remembered it, its gnarled branches stretching skyward, leaves dancing in the breeze. "I think I understand now," he said after a while, "why you kept his things. It's not just memory, it's connection." I nodded, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "Exactly. It's not about holding on to the past to stop living, it's about carrying the love and lessons forward, shaping the present, and helping guide the future." We walked home slowly, the sun dipping lower, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Back inside, he placed the notebook carefully on the shelf beside his bed, as if giving it a place of honor. I realized then that this simple act of sharing, listening, and simply being present had transformed both of us. He had found a way to express his grief, fears, and dreams, and I had found a way to support him without overwhelming or directing him. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the living room, looking at the quiet house. I thought about how easily life could have remained full of unspoken words, isolation, and misunderstanding. But instead, we had discovered the power of patience, empathy, and silent support. That I reflected on the journey we had taken together, the fear, the discovery, the shared grief, and the quiet triumphs of understanding each other. The notebook had been a starting point, but what truly mattered was the love, the patience, and the gentle guidance that allowed trust to flourish. As I prepared for bed, I felt a sense of profound gratitude. Life was not always easy, and growing up or growing older came with its share of challenges. But in that moment, I understood something crucial. The strongest bonds are built not through grand gestures, but through consistency, empathy, and quiet, unwavering presence. I paused, thinking of him sleeping upstairs, the notebook resting safely beside him, a silent testament to our shared journey. And I knew that no matter what the future held, teenage struggles, life's inevitable uncertainties, we would face it together, anchored by trust, love, and the small, precious moments that often pass unnoticed but stay with us forever. I end that quiet reflection, I smiled, knowing that the house was no longer just a place, it was a living memory, a story of growth, connection, and the enduring power of family. And as I turned off the light, I whispered softly to myself, "We've found each other again, and that's all that matters."